The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the distant glow of stars. In this quiet corner of the galaxy, something was about to change forever. The Velthari Empire had been expanding for over 200 years, crushing every civilization that stood in their path. They had perfected the art of war, turning conquest into a simple routine. Commander Dexmore stood tall on the command bridge of his flagship, the Shadow Dominion. His 4 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease, while his large black eyes scanned the tactical displays. The ship beneath his feet was a monster of metal and energy, stretching to full kilometers from bow to stern. Fusion torpedoes lined its hull like deadly teeth, ready to tear apart any enemy. Energy shields hummed with power, strong enough to survive the explosion of an entire planet. This was the 39th star system the Veltari had come to claim. Like all the others, it seemed weak and helpless. Their listening posts had picked up primitive radio signals from the 3rd planet, orbiting a yellow star. The signals were simple and unencrypted, the kind that young civilizations used before they learned better. Commander Dexmore had seen it all before. These creatures would surrender quickly once they saw his fleet, just like all the rest. The standard message had been sent 3 days ago. A simple demand broadcast on all frequencies. Surrender your world and join the Velthari Empire, or face total destruction. Most species took less than an hour to respond with complete submission. These humans, as they called themselves, had taken longer, but when their reply finally came, it surprised everyone on the bridge. Instead of fear or anger, the human response was polite and curious. They thanked the Velthari for making contact and suggested a diplomatic meeting. They even provided coordinates for the encounter, claiming it would be more comfortable for both sides. The location they chose was strange, empty space, far from their homeworld. With no planets or stations nearby, Commander Dexmore decided to make this meeting a show of force. He gathered his most powerful war fleet, 15 heavy battleships, each one capable of destroying a moon, 40 smaller escort vessels that moved like hunting wolves, and his own command ship leading them all. The combined firepower could level entire continents in minutes. When the humans saw this armada, they would understand their situation immediately. The jump to hyperspace felt like falling through liquid starlight. Space twisted and bent around the fleet as they traveled faster than light itself. When they dropped back into normal space at the meeting coordinates, Commander Dexmore expected to find the humans cowering in fear, ready to beg for mercy. Instead, he found something that made his crew laugh out loud. A single human ship waited at the designated spot, floating alone in the darkness. The vessel was tiny compared to the Velthari fleet, barely 400 meters long. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and materials, as if it had been built from spare parts found in a junkyard. Some sections gleamed with polished steel, while others showed the dull gray of cheaper alloys. Antenna arrays and sensor dishes stuck out at odd angles, giving the ship an uneven, almost comical appearance. The tactical officer, a young Velthari named Kexla, studied her displays and shook her head in disbelief. "Commander, their vessel shows no weapons signatures, no shield generators, no armor plating. It appears to be some kind of research ship." The bridge crew made clicking sounds with their mandibles, the Velthari equivalent of laughter. Some of them pointed at the pathetic human vessel with their lower arms, while operating controls with their upper ones. "This was going to be the easiest conquest in the history of their empire, Commander." Dexmore activated the communication system. Within minutes, arrangements were made for a face-to-face meeting aboard the human ship. The humans insisted on playing host, claiming it was a tradition of their species to welcome visitors properly. Dexmore agreed, seeing no possible threat from such a weak and primitive vessel. The docking procedure was smooth and professional, which surprised him slightly. The humans had managed to match their airlocks perfectly with Velthari specifications. suggesting they had studied alien technology more carefully than their crude ship implied. Still, this was probably just copied from other species they had met. When the airlock opened, Commander Vexmore and two of his officers stepped into a corridor that looked nothing like a warship. The walls were covered with soft materials in pleasant colors. Strange plants grew in containers along the sides, filling the air with unfamiliar but somehow calming scents. Artwork from what appeared to be many different worlds decorated the spaces between doorways. Captain Lee Jin met them at the entrance to what she called the diplomatic lounge. She was smaller than Vexmore had expected, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style and clothing that looked more suitable for a library than a battlefield. Her smile seemed genuine and warm, completely inappropriate for someone whose world was about to be conquered. She led them to a comfortable room with large windows that showed the stars outside. The furniture was designed to accommodate many different body types, with adjustable chairs and tables that could change height and shape. Captain Lee Jin personally served them a hot beverage she called tea, explaining that it was made from plants grown on Earth and had been a symbol of hospitality for thousands of years. As she poured the fragrant liquid into cups designed to fit Velthari hands, she began talking about trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts. She spoke as if the massive fleet surrounding her ship was a group of friends coming for a peaceful visit, not an invasion force capable of destroying her entire civilization. Commander Vexmore found himself genuinely confused by her behavior, wondering if these humans truly understood what was happening to them. The comfortable silence in the diplomatic lounge was broken by Commander Vexmore's deep voice. His mechanical translator worked perfectly, turning his native clicks and whistles into words that humans could understand. But the tone it carried was unmistakable, the cold authority of someone who had never been told no. "You may not grasp your circumstances," he said, setting down his teacup with deliberate slowness. His 4 black eyes fixed on Captain Lee Jin, with the intensity of a predator studying prey. "We have subjugated civilizations vastly superior to your species. Their technology was more advanced than yours. Their fleets were larger. Their warriors were fiercer, yet they all kneel before the Velthari Empire now." He stood up from his chair, his full height making him tower over the human captain. His officers flanked him on either side, their hands resting near their energy weapons. The message was clear. This was no longer a friendly conversation. "Submit immediately," Vexmore continued, his voice growing harder with each word. "Accept the generous terms we offer, and your people will receive reasonable treatment as vassals of our empire. You will work for us, provide us with resources, and follow our laws. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing. This is far better than what happens to those who resist us." Captain Lee Jin listened to every word without changing her expression. Her smile never wavered, and her hands remained steady as she poured herself another cup of tea. When the commander finished speaking, she took a slow sip of the hot beverage and looked thoughtfully out the large observation window at the stars beyond. "We understand our situation completely," she said in the same calm, friendly tone she had used to welcome them aboard. "Your fleet is impressive, Commander. 56 ships total, if our sensors are accurate. Very well organized, very disciplined. Your crews clearly know their business." Vexmore felt a small flutter of surprise. Most species could barely count his vessels, let alone identify the exact number so quickly. But he pushed the thought aside. Counting ships was one thing, fighting them was entirely different. Captain Lee Jin stood up and walked to the observation window, gesturing for her guests to join her. "Perhaps you'd prefer to examine our defensive forces first," she suggested pleasantly. "It might improve our discussions if you have all the relevant information." Commander Vexmore followed her to the window, confident that whatever pathetic defense fleet the humans possessed would only prove his point more clearly. Through the transparent metal, he could see his own magnificent armada spread across the darkness of space. The Shadow Dominion sat at the center like a deadly flower, surrounded by the smaller but equally lethal ships of his battle group. Their running lights twinkled like dangerous stars, and their weapon systems glowed with barely contained energy. "I see only empty space beyond our fleet," he said with amusement. "Where exactly are these defensive forces you speak of?" Before Captain Li Jin could reply, something impossible began to happen outside the window. The space around them started to shimmer and distort, like heat waves rising from hot pavement on a summer day. At first, Vexmore thought there might be a problem with the window itself, or perhaps some kind of sensor malfunction. But then the shimmer began to take shape, and his 4 eyes widened in disbelief. Ships began appearing out of nowhere, not just 1 or 2 vessels, but dozens of them, materializing from what had appeared to be completely empty space. They seemed to unfold from nothingness itself, their hulls becoming solid and real, where moments before there had been only darkness. Advanced stealth technology, far beyond anything the Velthari had ever encountered. But that was only the beginning. More ships continued to appear, first tens, then hundreds, then thousands. They kept coming and coming, filling the void around the Velthari fleet, like flowers blooming in fast forward. These weren't the small, primitive vessels that Dexmore had expected. They were monsters of metal and energy that made his own ships look like toys by comparison. The first ship to fully materialize nearly stopped his heart. The Earth's Fury was a battleship that stretched 12 full kilometers from nose to tail, 3 times longer than his own flagship. Its hull was covered in weapon arrays that the Velthari sensors couldn't even identify, let alone classify. Energy readings from the massive vessel showed power levels that should have been impossible for any ship to contain. Following close behind came the carrier, New Dawn, a floating city designed for war. As soon as it appeared, launch bays along its sides opened like hungry mouths. Swarms of fighter craft poured out in perfect formation, thousands of small ships moving together like schools of deadly fish. Each squadron flew in patterns so precise. They seemed to be controlled by a single mind. More and more vessels continued to appear around them. Armed space citadels that were less like ships, and more like mobile planets, bristling with weapons that made Velthari fusion cannons look like children's toys. Orbital platforms that generated their own gravity fields, bending space around them in ways that hurt to look at directly. Ships so large they had their own weather systems, with clouds forming in the atmosphere trapped by their artificial gravity. Commander, Dexmore's hands began to shake as he watched his proud fleet become completely surrounded. The Velthari vessels that had seemed so powerful and threatening just moments before now looked like minnows swimming among whales. Every single human ship that appeared was larger, more advanced, and more heavily armed than anything his empire had ever built. His tactical officer's voice crackled through his communication device, high-pitched with panic. "Commander, our sensors are going crazy. The energy readings from these human vessels are off the charts. Some of them are showing power signatures equivalent to small stars." Captain Li Jin finished her tea and set the cup down gently on the table. Her smile had never changed, never faltered, even as she revealed a fleet that could probably conquer the entire Velthari Empire without breaking a sweat. "Now then," she said pleasantly, "shall we continue our negotiations?" Commander, Dexmore felt his world crumbling around him as he stared through the observation window. The confidence that had carried him through 39 successful conquests vanished like smoke in the wind. His hands gripped the window frame so tightly that his knuckles turned white beneath his gray skin. The proud arrogance that had defined his entire career dissolved into something much smaller and more frightening. The communication device clipped to his uniform crackled with panicked reports from his fleet. Officers who had never shown fear in battle now spoke with voices high and tight with terror. "Commander, the energy readings are impossible. Our sensors are burning out trying to measure their power levels. Sir, the largest human vessel is showing energy output equal to our entire battle group combined. Commander, our weapons targeting systems cannot lock onto their ships. It's like they're bending space around themselves. Bexmore's own eyes confirmed what his officers were reporting. The human ships weren't just larger than anything the Velthari had ever built. They were operating on completely different principles of science and technology. He watched in amazement as one of the human vessels seemed to fold space around itself, disappearing from one location and instantly appearing in another without crossing the distance between. Another ship was manipulating gravity itself, creating small artificial moons that orbited around its hull like cosmic jewelry. Most disturbing of all were the weapons. He could see charging along the human ship's hulls. They didn't look like fusion cannons or plasma batteries or any other weapon system he recognized. These devices seemed to twist reality itself, creating distortions in space that made his eyes water just to look at them. His science officer had called them reality scramblers in his report, admitting that Velthari science had no explanation for how such weapons could even exist. "This cannot be," he whispered, speaking more to himself than to Captain Li Jin. His voice carried the confusion of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just been proven wrong. "Your communications technology, your development stage, you seemed to be an underdeveloped race." He turned away from the window to face the human captain, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "We intercepted your radio signals. Primitive electromagnetic broadcasts that any young civilization uses before they discover better methods. Our experts analyzed your technology and determined that you were centuries behind our own development. How is this possible?" Captain Li Jin moved with the same calm, unhurried grace she had shown since their meeting began. She walked to the tea service and carefully refilled his cup, the hot liquid steaming in the recycled air of the ship. Her movements were so ordinary, so peaceful, that they seemed to mock the incredible display of power happening outside the windows. "Those ancient radio broadcasts," she said with a gentle laugh that somehow made Bexmore's skin crawl. "We've employed quantum tunneling communications for generations. Instant communication across any distance, completely secure and impossible to intercept. We solved that problem over 200 years ago." She handed him the refilled cup, and he noticed that her hands were completely steady. No trembling, no nervousness, no sign that she was facing down the most powerful military force the Velthari Empire had ever assembled. If anything, she seemed to be enjoying herself. "We maintained the old radio transmission towers for sentimental reasons," she continued, settling back into her chair as if they were discussing the weather. "They remind us of simpler times, when humanity was young and innocent. And, of course, for circumstances precisely like this encounter." The meaning of her words hit Bexmore like a physical blow. "You mean you deliberately made yourselves appear primitive? This was all planned." "Not planned exactly," Li Jin said, taking a sip of her own tea, "but prepared for. You see, Commander, humans learned a very important lesson centuries ago when we first began exploring the galaxy. We discovered that space is full of hostile species who see peaceful intentions as weakness. Aggressive empires that view kindness as an invitation to conquest." She gestured toward the window, where the human fleet continued to grow as more ships decloaked from their hiding places. Each new vessel that appeared was more impressive than the last, displaying technology that seemed to come from the realm of pure fantasy rather than engineering. "We tried the direct approach at first," she explained. "Open communication, honest diplomacy, showing our true capabilities from the beginning. Do you know what happened? Every single aggressive species we encountered saw our advanced technology as a threat that needed to be eliminated immediately. They attacked us before we could even begin negotiations." Bexmore felt his legs growing weak as the full scope of what she was telling him became clear. The humans hadn't just stumbled into advanced technology, they had deliberately developed it. as a response to species exactly like his own. So we created a different strategy, Li Jin continued, a straightforward approach that has served us well for over 3 centuries. We appear harmless when first observed, broadcasting old technology, signatures, and primitive communications. This attracts the attention of aggressive empires who see us as easy prey. She smiled that same warm, friendly smile that had welcomed him aboard their ship. But now it carried a completely different meaning, one that made his blood run cold. Then, when those empires come to conquer us, we reveal just enough of our true power to end the conflict quickly and decisively. It saves lives on both sides, and usually results in much more productive relationships afterward. Outside the window, a human ship, the size of a small moon, moved silently through space, its hull covered in weapons that could probably crack planets in half. Vexmore realized with growing horror that this wasn't humanity's full military might. This was just what they were willing to show him. The comfortable warmth of the diplomatic lounge felt suffocating to Commander Vexmore as captain. Li Jin continued speaking in her maddeningly calm voice. Each word she spoke hit him like a hammer blow, destroying everything he thought he knew about human civilization and his own empire's place in the galaxy. "We've monitored your empire for 30 years, she said, refilling his teacup once again, with the same careful precision she had shown throughout their meeting. The simple act of pouring tea somehow made her words even more terrifying. "Our deep space observation posts have been watching you since you conquered the Krell system back in 2195. We've observed you conquering system after system, always using the same tactics, always following the same patterns." Vexmore's mind raced as he tried to process what she was telling him. 30 years of observation meant the humans had been studying his empire since before he had even received his first command. They had watched him rise through the ranks, seen him develop his reputation as a brilliant military strategist, observed every battle he had ever fought. "We examined your methods very carefully," Li Jin continued, settling back into her chair, with the relaxed posture of someone discussing a hobby rather than interstellar warfare. "Your preference for overwhelming force displays, your reliance on intimidation rather than actual combat, your tendency to target weaker civilizations that couldn't possibly resist your technology. We studied your weapons, learned how your fusion torpedoes work, figured out the frequency patterns of your energy shields." She paused to take a sip of her tea, and in that moment of silence, Vexmore could hear the soft hum of the human ship's systems around them. Everything sounded so peaceful, so ordinary, completely at odds with the devastating revelation that his entire military career had been under constant observation by an enemy he never knew existed. "Most importantly," she said, "we examined your vulnerabilities. Every empire has weaknesses, Commander, even ones as powerful as yours. The Velthari's strength comes from your superior technology and your ability to project force across vast distances. But your weakness is that you've never faced an opponent who could match or exceed your capabilities." Outside the observation window, the human fleet continued its silent dance around the trapped Velthari ships. Each human vessel moved with perfect precision, maintaining exactly the right distance and angle to maximize their tactical advantage. It was like watching a carefully choreographed performance, one that had clearly been practiced many times before. "When you eventually targeted us," Li Jin said, "we intended to be prepared. And as you can see, our preparations were quite thorough." Commander Vexmore looked around the lounge and noticed details he had missed before. The walls weren't just decorated with artwork from different worlds, they were covered with detailed tactical displays, showing the positions of every ship in both fleets. Status boards hidden among the decorative panels showed weapon readiness, levels, shield strengths, and communication frequencies. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting room, it was a fully functional command center, disguised as a place for friendly conversation. The Velthari Armada had discovered themselves entirely encircled by ships that exceeded them in every measurable aspect, size, firepower, defensive capabilities, maneuverability, sensor range. In every category that mattered for space combat, the human vessels were clearly superior. But what horrified Dexmore most wasn't the devastating firepower aimed at his ships. It was the relaxed, almost casual manner in which the humans discussed neutralizing his Empire's fleet while serving him additional tea. A soft chime sounded from somewhere in the walls, and Captain Li Jin glanced at one of the hidden displays. "Ah, perfect timing," she said with evident satisfaction. "My crew has just finished their preparations." As if summoned by her words, other human officers began speaking from various stations around the room. Dexmore realized that what he had taken for decorative alcoves were actually workstations where crew members had been monitoring the situation throughout their entire conversation. Lieutenant Park Min stood at what appeared to be a bookshelf, but was actually a sophisticated tactical station. Her voice was calm and professional as she delivered her report. "Captain, we have confirmed weapon locks on all 56 Velthari vessels. Targeting solutions are uploaded and ready for immediate execution on your command." From another corner of the room, Commander Kim Hai looked up from what seemed to be an art display, but was clearly a communications console. Her fingers moved rapidly across hidden controls as she spoke. "Translation protocols are active for 17 different galactic languages, Captain. Surrender offers have been prepared and are ready for broadcast on all standard frequencies." The entire bridge crew operated with the kind of efficient professionalism that only came from extensive practice. Every movement was precise. Every report was delivered in the same calm tone. Every system response was exactly what would be expected from a crew that had performed this same scenario countless times before. This wasn't their first encounter with an aggressive empire, and it clearly wouldn't be their last. Captain Li Jin listened to each report with the satisfaction of a teacher whose students had performed exactly as expected. When the last officer had finished speaking, she turned back to Commander Dexmore with that same warm, friendly smile that had greeted him when he first came aboard. "Your options are clear," she said, maintaining her pleasant demeanor even as she spelled out terms that would determine the fate of his entire empire. "You can attempt your intimidation approach elsewhere, perhaps find a species that hasn't spent decades preparing for your arrival, or you can discover firsthand why every species that has underestimated humanity has survived to learn from their mistake." She leaned forward slightly, and for just a moment, Dexmore glimpsed something harder and more dangerous behind her friendly expression. "We favor peaceful solutions, Commander. We always prefer diplomacy to violence, negotiation to destruction. But make no mistake, we are fully equipped for alternative outcomes if you choose to make them necessary." The choice was his, but they both knew there was really no choice at all. The final demonstration came without warning and ended the standoff in seconds. Commander Dexmore had been struggling with his decision, weighing the impossible choice between surrender and destruction, when one of his sensor officers made a discovery that changed everything. "Commander," the young Velthari called out, his voice tight with excitement. "Long-range sensors are detecting a large meteor cluster approaching from the outer system. The objects appear to be on a collision course with the human formation. Perhaps we can use this distraction too." His words were cut off as every eye in the Velthari fleet turned to watch what happened next. The meteor cluster was indeed massive, consisting of hundreds of space rocks ranging in size from small buildings to entire mountains. They tumbled through space on a direct path toward the human ships, their irregular surfaces glinting in the light of the distant star. Captain Li Jin glanced at one of her hidden displays and made a small gesture with her hand. "Lieutenant Park Min, would you mind clearing those obstacles? They might interfere with our guest's departure." "Of course, Captain," came the calm reply from the tactical station. The human dreadnought, unstoppable, moved with surprising grace for something so enormous. Its hull was covered in what appeared to be thousands of small weapon ports, each one no larger than a dinner plate. As the meteor cluster approached, these tiny weapons began to glow with a soft blue light. What followed was not a battle, but an exhibition of power so casual and effortless that it redefined everything Commander Vexmore thought he knew about military technology. Thin beams of coherent energy lanced out from the unstoppable, each one striking a different meteor with surgical precision. The space rocks didn't explode or shatter dramatically. Instead, they simply ceased to exist, converted into harmless particles of dust and gas that sparkled briefly in the starlight before dispersing into nothingness. The entire meteor cluster, hundreds of objects, some of which were larger than battleships, was eliminated in less than 30 seconds. The unstoppable never changed course, never slowed down, never showed any sign that it had just performed a task more difficult than swatting flies. Basic point defense systems, Captain, Li Jin explained to the stunned Commander Vexmore, as if apologizing for the interruption. We use them to clear navigation hazards and small debris. Nothing fancy, really. That was the moment when Commander Vexmore's resistance finally broke completely. If the humans could casually destroy mountain-sized objects with weapons they considered basic defensive tools, then what could their actual military systems accomplish? He didn't want to find out. His hands shook as he activated his communication system and broadcast the words that ended his military career and changed the course of galactic history. All Velthari vessels, this is Commander Vexmore. I hereby order the complete and unconditional surrender of our entire battle group to human authority. Stand down all weapons, lower all shields, and prepare to follow their instructions. The response from his own ships was immediate and unanimous. Every captain in his fleet acknowledged the surrender order without question or protest. They had all seen the same demonstration, watched their most advanced weapons become obsolete in the span of half a minute. News of the surrender spread through the Velthari Empire faster than their fastest ships could travel. Within hours, emergency sessions were being called in the imperial capital. Within days, the entire governmental structure that had ruled 39 star systems began to crumble as member worlds questioned whether continued resistance to humanity was possible or even sane. The Velthari Empire, which had been built on the foundation of technological supremacy and military might, collapsed overnight when reports circulated throughout their territory. They had encountered a species that rendered their greatest accomplishments primitive by comparison. Fusion torpedoes that could crack moons seemed pathetic next to weapons that could erase matter from existence. Energy shields that could withstand planetary bombardments were laughable compared to defenses that could bend space itself. Yet, as the reality of their situation became clear, something unexpected happened. Humanity sought neither domination nor vengeance against their former enemies. Instead of demanding tribute or imposing harsh terms of surrender, they extended to the Velthari the same offer they had apparently presented to every species they encountered: cooperation, scientific exchange, and protection against genuinely dangerous galactic threats. Captain Li Jin personally oversaw the negotiation process, serving endless cups of tea while working out the details of what she called a mutual assistance pact. The beverage seemed to have some kind of calming effect on the negotiations. She had mentioned with that same unsettling smile that never quite left her face as the formal surrender procedures began. Other human officers took over different aspects of the process with the same quiet efficiency they had shown throughout the encounter. Captain Cho Yoon of the escort vessel Harmony transmitted detailed diplomatic protocols to the retreating Velthari ships, providing them with communication frequencies and contact procedures for future interactions. Admiral Songdae, commanding from the massive station Unity, coordinated the human fleet's return to their hidden positions. One by one, the incredible warships that had surrounded and outgunned the Velthari Armada began to fade from view. Their advanced stealth systems engaged smoothly, making the vessels disappear as completely as if they had never existed. Within an hour, The human armada had vanished as smoothly as it had appeared. The only evidence that thousands of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been present was the modest research vessel Pioneer, floating alone in the vast emptiness of space, exactly where Commander Thexmore had first found it, as his own. Ship retreated from Earth's territory, carrying news of humanity's true nature, back to what remained of the Velthari government. Thexmore found himself thinking about everything he had witnessed. The most frightening aspect of humans wasn't their impossible technology or their devastating firepower, though both were certainly terrifying enough. It was their ability to build weapons, capable of destroying entire civilizations, while simultaneously extending genuine friendship to their former enemies. They represented something completely new in his experience, a species that could prevent wars before they began, simply by making it clear that starting a conflict with humanity would be the final mistake anyone could ever make. The galaxy would never look at those innocent radio signals the same way again.